Hello, and welcome to the Libertarian Show. Today I want to talk about an article that was very recently published by InTheseTimes.com. As of the recording of this video today, on Memorial Day 2021, it's on the front page of their website. You can't miss it. It's been making the rounds on the internet in both the capitalist and socialist circles, basically. I thought it was worth talking about. I had some interesting thoughts on it. Here's the article. When these workers unionized, their cafe was put up for sale, so they bought it. The White Electric Cafe in Providence, Rhode Island, has a group of workers that decided to form a union, and the owner of the cafe, faced with a unionized workforce, said, "Screw that, I'm going to sell this place." He decided to give the workers themselves the first dibs on buying the place, and they agreed, so they became owners of the cafe. Let me quote a little bit from the article. The workers realized they could form an independent labor union, which they named the Collaborative Union of Providence Service Workers, or CUPS. The very night they formed the union, the workers say, they received notice that the owner was selling. Now the worker owners are focused on the challenge, of running the cafe. The shop has no managers, and profits are distributed based on the hours worked. Employees have to invest a $1,000 member buy-in if they want to work there, which can be paid with a $100 deposit and $10 installments from each paycheck. So, first off, everything these workers did, from organizing as a labor union, to buying the company, to sharing ownership among each worker, is 100% compatible with capitalism. All right. Is what they did also compatible with socialism? Maybe, depending on how you define socialism. There's more variants of socialism than there are variants of religion, you know what I mean? And each one is mutually exclusive, and each one has, different little details. But keep in mind that this cafe is explicitly and openly pursuing profit, and they even require an ownership buy-in for those who want to work there. You got to pay to play. So what kind of socialism is that? It's market socialism, or as I like to call it, diet capitalism, as a joke, really. Yeah, I know, market socialism. So if your idea of socialism is basically the same as what we have now, with the exception of worker ownership being mandatory, but you're okay with the competition, you're okay with the markets, you're okay with consumer choice, you're okay with zero economic planning, you're okay with zero welfare, minimal, government redistribution, and you just want the market to handle everything, well, then your socialism overlaps about 90% with capitalism. Like a Venn diagram, they're like almost complete overlap. Okay. It's like the collapse of capitalism and socialism into one synthesized, system. Here's the thing. Most versions of socialism, the non-market versions of socialism, oppose profit. Most versions of socialism say that profit is exploitation and exploitation is bad. Most versions of socialism oppose markets and oppose competition. There's popular, left-wing YouTubers that openly and repeatedly oppose competition. And this cafe is purposefully trying to earn a profit, and it operates in a market framework. It doesn't ration its products to people based on some ration booklet coupon thing. It competes with other cafes, and it markets its products and services to consumers, trying to convince people to patronize the shop. So it's respecting consumer choice. It's operating within the market consumer choice competitive paradigm. All right. Let me elaborate a little bit on worker ownership. So socialists pretty much exclusively mandate worker ownership of the MOP, the means of production. Depending on what kind of socialist you're talking to, either they want the workers to individually own the companies that they work at and no other, or sometimes they want all the companies to be owned as a whole collectively by all of society. But regardless, they want workers to own the means of production. Now, the implication that a lot of socialists make, and a lot of times they assume that capitalism opposes worker ownership of the means of production. That's false. That's not true. Capitalism is silent on who is allowed to own what, which To put another way, capitalism is totally okay with workers owning the means of production. It's totally okay with workers not owning the means of production. It's totally okay with workers owning the means of production that they do work at or that they don't work at. You could have one worker that works at one MOP and can have ownership stakes in 10,000 MOPs. It doesn't matter to capitalism. All of that is fine. All of that is compatible with capitalism. Capitalism is totally okay with anyone owning or not owning whatever they want as they see fit. All right. The point here is that is not about who owns what. From the capitalist perspective, the point here is that ownership is done by choice. It is opt-in. It is up to the individual person what they are going to own and what they're going to put their stake in. There's no mandates. There's no prohibitions. That's the point of capitalism. All right. Now, socialism, on the other hand, forbids owning the means of production that you don't work at, unless they want everything to be owned like collectively. But most versions of socialism, the popular ones on the internet today, say you're only allowed to work at the company that you work. You're only allowed to own, rather, the company that you work at and no other, and that you're not even allowed to work at a company unless you own it. So socialism has a very restrictive and very narrow prescription for ownership, one that is exclusively comprised of mandates and prohibitions, and everything's on rails and very narrowly allowed, and you basically got handcuffs on people on what they are and are not allowed to own. There's little or no choice involved in terms of what means of production you're allowed to own. So getting back to the cafe here, when the cafe is earning a profit and competing in the marketplace, it is doing all the things that capitalism says to do. It's following the capitalist prescription of competition and consumer choice and marketplaces and floating price mechanisms and all that crap, okay? And that remains true whether the cafe is owned by a single proprietor or owned by the workers of the cafe or owned by various investors around the globe. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing as far as capitalism is concerned. When a company is owned by an exclusive group, whether it is a sole owner or a workers or a bunch of investors, then that company is privately owned. All right. Worker co-ops are privately owned. Ownership in a worker co-op is exclusive and opt-in, just the same as it is for a company that issues shares to investors or a company that has just, a couple of partners or a single, solitary owner. This cafe has a $1,000 buy-in if you want to work there. That's like a total ownership share that you're paying for. That's like an investment. You know what I mean? That's extremely capitalist. All right, from my perspective, from the capitalist perspective. You know what would be interesting to see is if the cafe would entertain an offer by a job seeker to let him work there, and what if they say, hey, we want to hire you, it's $1,000 buy-in, and he goes, how about this, would you guys be willing to consider that I do not pay you $1,000, and then I do not get an ownership share, and then I do not get a share of the profits either, and instead you just pay me a flat agreed upon hourly wage, that we agree on ahead of time. Less risk for him, right? I wonder, how entertaining would that be to them? They might be opposed on principle, but I can imagine there would be plenty of circumstances where, from the cafe owner's perspective, it might be, financially advantageous for them to pay him just a flat wage and not let him get an ownership share. I mean, sometimes that makes sense financially, not all the time, but it could, I wonder if they would ever entertain that, or if they would just be opposed in principle to that kind of arrangement happening. Either way, whichever way they choose is obviously okay. But it would be funny to see. It would be funny to see how that would play out. I'll tell you what. I'm sure they're okay with letting a plumber fix their clogged sink without buying in, or maybe letting a paving company repaint the parking lot lines in their parking lot without having them buy in. Right. So there's going to be plenty of instances, or at least with short-term labor, or limited time jobs. So maybe someone needs to repair some electrical equipment in the cafe, and it's just going to take a week. And they say, look, okay, we'll let the electrician work here, and we'll just pay him, for the job, or pay him an hourly rate, and he doesn't have to buy in. So I'm sure they're gonna come across situations where they break their own rule and let people work on the cafe, at least for a limited amount of time, without having to pay a buy-in, right? I mean, it would be silly otherwise. Either way, this is a cool story. I think it's a cool story. I like to see this kind of thing happen, and the anarcho-capitalists on the internet, on the anarcho-capitalist subreddit, they liked seeing this happen, and the socialists on Twitter also liked seeing it happen. The labor activists liked seeing it happen. Everyone was counting it like as a win for their side, and you know what? It probably is. Why not? So it's a situation that made the capitalists and the socialists both happy. I feel like this kind of thing manages to shrink or collapse the divide between the left and the right. Because it's something that happened that seems to be compatible with at least market socialism, and it's certainly compatible with capitalism. And the pro-labor left and the pro-business right both seem to like the outcome. So it is a win-win. And honestly, if this is the kind of socialism that happens in real life, I'm totally okay with it. If this is the kind of socialism that gets more popular in the global economy, then I'm not going to be upset. This Providence cafe is exercising a version of socialism that I don't mind seeing spread. I count it as capitalism too. One thing's for sure. Planned economics and big government style socialism are on the downtrend in the global economy. See my previous video titled "The Real World is Becoming More Capitalist" for more details about that trend. So this Providence Cafe is the opposite of the big government planned economic style socialism. This is very worker-centric, it's very pro-individualism too. Even though the workers unionized and all this stuff, you might think, oh, collectivism. It's very pro-individualism. It's self-autonomous. You know what I mean? The workers exercised autonomy. They weren't dictated to by above. They weren't dictated to. They talk about democratic operation of the company. You know what? I'll tell you what. The society as a whole did not vote for them to become the owners. They took initiative on their own. So it's very individualistic in that sense. And that's something that's cool to see. So every time a worker co-op forms and succeeds, then maybe we can count it as a win for the small government socialists as well as the small government capitalists. So 3 cheers for bottom unity, man. Thanks for watching.